Hey Shubham, hi, how are you?
Hi Atisha, I'm good. What about you?
Doing good, bro, doing good. So, how was your week?
So I would say like it was quite hectic, but yeah, you cannot complain about the life, right? So
Good.
it went well. Yeah, so enjoying the things. Yeah. What about you, Atisha? How was your week?
Same for me, yeah. So, it was hectic professionally, but yeah. But despite of being a hectic schedule, this is what I would look forward to in my entire week, right? Catching up with you over the weekend regarding a podcast. So, this is the highlight of my week, I have to say.
Exactly. So once again we are back, and it's Saturday afternoon, and we are again on our podcast episode. So our last podcast is all about what does success mean, okay? And where we have given our opinions and views, right? So after that podcast, there's a few people and there's a few students who asked me, so what exactly the difference between the culture of MNCs and a startup, right? So there are a lot of people who wants to understand because they haven't worked in some of them have worked in MNCs, some of them have worked in in startups. So they don't have much idea like which is good, whether we have to go with MNC our target should be, or we need to always stick with startups, right? So that's why I thought like why don't we give in today's podcast detail on what the difference between a startup and MNCs, right? And as I know, like Atisha, I already know like you as well, you already worked in startup companies as well and MNCs as well, and same goes with me. So I have a good relevant experience throughout my life, after graduation most of the times I worked in a startup company, and then now recently I joined the MNC as well, so I can also give my highlight on this. So over to you, Atisha. You start with like how was your experience in startup and how you can differentiate that with MNC. So yeah.
That's a really interesting topic for today. So that is also a very pressing question which many of my juniors ask me. If I have to start my career, should I go for a startup or should I work in a more reliable, secure job in a MNC? So I have to say, when you work in a startup, you're not just learning about your role, you're also gauging information, gauging knowledge of different roles. Like for an example, let's say you started your career working in a startup as a project coordinator. So you're not just doing your project coordinator work. You at times you might be pulled into some sales related work, you might be pulled into some digital marketing work, you might be pulled into some operations work, right? Maybe sometimes HR related task also. So you are working in different domains, you are gauging knowledge of different domains, and you're also learning about the business and industry as a whole. Whereas if you're working in MNC, you would be just restricted to your domain, your work, right? Because there are not many people to perform that role or to do that job. So if you really want to understand how industry works, if you really want to understand how, if you really want to get a sense of different roles, if you're not sure if this is the role for me, so startup is a really ideal choice for you, because in startup you will gauge more knowledge of different domains and different roles, and from that you can decide, okay, so this is my cup of tea, I should make my career in this particular role and I should pursue this role to climb the corporate ladder. So these are my 2 cents on the topic, buddy. So what do you think? Should someone start their career with a startup or should someone start their career with MNC? Then we can talk about our experiences also. Over to you, buddy.
So Atisha, I mean, like you have, really well explained each and everything about like how was the things in startup and how the things in MNC companies, right? So if I tell you about my experience and what I have been, faced so far in terms of difference between startup companies and MNC. So let's take an example like this way. So I used to follow one of the, richest person in China, Jack Ma. We all know about him. Okay, so he's one of the richest person. So started his career, very lower stage. He never thought like he can become one of the richest person in his life. So when people ask to him as well, like what exactly the things would be and what kind of life lesson he can give us. So he always tell like when you work with a small company, okay, so then you are attached with a lot of different parts. Okay, you learn the things, you inspire the people, you got, like when you graduated, you have a lot of energies. Okay? So at that time, you try to, uh, take a lot of responsibilities on your shoulders, right? You just want to work more and more things. You want to, get more work, right? So there is no any kind of limited amount of work you should get. If I talk about in terms of startup, whereas if you become a part of MNC, so it's a part of, you become a part of big machine, right? You're a part of big machine where you are, constrained with some limited amount of things. Okay, so if there is any work or if there is any other thing, so you are limited for those kind of things. So that was something which hit me as well. So when I started my graduation, so I also thought, yeah, so I need to first start with some kind of startup companies. And so far my experience in startup, so I tell you, like, every day is going to be a challenge for you, right? If there is no any challenge, then there is no any work, right? So that's what I think what defines when we graduate. So we have new spark in our eyes. Okay, we just want to say, like, we want to change the world, right? So that spark and those kind of things, I think it should be better, from my opinion, that we should start from startup companies, where you can engage yourself in different things, where you can learn the things from your boss, where you can learn the things, how the people in the companies are working around you, how they are doing different things, how they are doing multiple things. You can feel those things, you can feel those works, right? You can attach with the smaller things, and you are getting the result on the basis of that. So that's really impact on your morale, that really impact on your mindset as well, that how you want to go forward to things. Same goes with when you are part of MNC company. So I don't say like there is any kind of disadvantage, there is any kind of other things, but that depends upon the person's choice, right? So if we consider the MNC company, so for that you are a part of big machine, you have some limited amount of work. In that amount of work, you can be more creative. So there is one advantage with MNC companies as well. So you can be more creative. You get a lot of time to do that single work. So you can use your brain, that how efficient you can do that work. So that's what my opinion in terms of startup and MNC company. So let's talk about your experience so far, your personal experience, Abhishek.
Yeah, so if I have to share my experience, so one thing I would like to share is, in MNCs, things move really slow, right? Because there's a lot of bureaucracy involved. There's a lot of approvals which you need to get things moving, to get things flowing. So things moves really, really slow in MNC in comparison to a startup where things move very rapidly, right? You maybe in a MNC, for a single sign off, it might take maybe 2-3 weeks, right? But in a startup, that might get done in a couple of days, not in an entire week.
The point that you are mentioning,
yeah. So I'm speaking from my experience.
Exactly. So the straight away I can one example hit it in my mind. The same thing happened with me. If I talk about in terms of when we go for an interview, the same thing happened, right? So it took almost, you can say, 2 months around to to proceed and to complete all kind of joining formalities, for one company which I've joined last time. So that was the thing. So like the way you said, Shubham, it takes
it's a lot of process. The reason is because there's a lot of bureaucracy, right? Because there are a lot of people in the chain, and they need approvals from each and every person in the hierarchy to get something approved, right? To get something moved. So that is one of the reasons why things happen really, really slow in a MNC in comparison to a startup, where there are less people in the chain and things move at a much faster pace. So that is one distinction to work in a startup and a MNC. Another difference which I can say is, in a MNC, your seniors, your boss, sometimes your CEO is less approachable, right? Whereas in a startup, that person is really, really approachable, right? That person might be, so your CEO might be sitting besides you, and CEO might be sitting with you in the same office, right? But in a MNC, there's a lot of layering between you and your maybe senior stakeholders, or you and your maybe CEOs or C-suites, right? So that is another distinction between a startup and an MNC, and you can speak more freely in a startup about your opinions, your views, whereas in a MNC, you might not get hurt, right? So that is another difference between working in a startup versus working in MNC. So that is all, the differences in the working culture. But yeah, they're not all demerits about working in a MNC. So one good thing about working in a MNC is, at first, job security. Second, there are systems in places, right? For each and everything, there's a system in place, right? For you to get promoted, there's a system in place. Even there's a system in place for things to happen, right? Anything, they follow a SOP, right? They follow a standard procedure for a project, for everything. So there's a system in place, so you don't have to worry about operations piece of how things will move. But in a startup, when there are not system in place, sometimes it creates a havoc, it creates a chaos, right? Because no one knows what to do next, how to do it. So that is also a good thing about working in a MNC in comparison with startup, because they have well-oiled engines, they have well-defined systems in place to get things done. So what is your experience, buddy, working in a startup?
So I think you have covered most of the things Satish here. Like that's what experience of mine as well. So if I talk about my experience in a startup, so my hands were into different things. Like I was a part of project coordinator, but still I have some knowledge of testing as well. I have some knowledge of business analyst work as well. I know like how you can inspect some kind of your coding as well. So these are the things. So you can you get to use with lot of different things, and you can learn more over the things. The only thing which you have mentioned, like it's all about job security, right? So like if you don't know like when company is going to be shut down, right? If you have 50 to 40 employees of a company, right? And we have seen so far, like just because of the pandemic, right? So there are a lot of companies who's not right now is nowhere in Noida, right? So there are a lot of IT companies who's vanished from just because of the pandemic. They are no anymore. Okay, so that is what which makes other people think that if they don't have any job security, so why they work in a startup company, right?
Totally.
So there are the pros and cons. There will always be there for every coin has two sides, right? So there will be head, tails. Every coin has two sides. Things with it as well. You have MNC, you have startup. So it's up to you, like how you want to go with the things. If you want to learn different things, you can join a startup companies. If you want, moreover, like you want some kind of job security, and you want like your life would be more balanced, stable, so you can join MNC companies. So that's what my opinion on this so far, and I think that's all. That's all we can cover on this. If there is any other question,
our discussion. Conclude our discussion on working in an MNC versus working in a startup. So if you are a young professional who has just started the career, startup would be a good place for you to learn things, right? Because when you in your initial years, the only thing you should focus on, at least for maybe 3-4 years, is to learn about the domain, to learn about the technical pieces, right? So if you want to grow in your career, and if you start working in a startup in your initial years, your learning curve will be much faster than a person who starts his career working in a MNC, because you have already learned a lot of things which that person will learn in maybe, let's say, 5-7 years. You've already learned that pieces, that information in 3-4 years, right? So you're already ahead of that person in terms of your knowledge and expertise. So if you're a young professional, startup is a good place for you to start. But if you are a person who is in his mid-career, right, maybe someone who has spent more than 7-8 years, or let's say 10 plus years working in the industry, then for that person, adjusting to a startup culture will be really tough, because he's used to the systems in places, he's used to all the convenience, all the facilities that MNC provides. So for that person, it would be really tough to be habitual to work, to get habitual to working in a startup. And also there is no job security, because when you have 10 plus experience, the assumption is that you are married, you have a child to support, and as you rightly mentioned, that there is less of a job security in a startup. So that might be one of the fear in the back of my mind, which sometimes lead to less productivity. So yeah, that is my 2 cents again on the piece.
You have covered most of the things, Atish, and I think this podcast is going to be relevant for all the viewers who are just who just be confused, like what exactly they want to choose. Either they want to go with a startup or they want to go with a MNC. So I think that's all we have. So guys, keep supporting us, and if there is any other question you have, just write down in the comment section. And stay wonderful, stay happy. Thank you so much.
Stay safe, guys. See you next week. Bye.